My fiancé Ollie and I have been together for 4 years, living together for 2, recently got engaged. Our relationship has been great for the most part. One of the few things we disagree on is animals. I love animals and Ollie feels indifferent towards most animals. To give a little background about me, I've always been an animal lover. Throughout my childhood, my mom hated animals, especially dogs. My mom never let us have any pets, and she used to tell us that once we were adults we could have whatever animals we wanted. When I moved away for college, I lived on campus for 4 years, and therefore couldn't have any pets. I've wanted a dog for as long as I could remember, but up until recently it wasn't in the cards for me to have a dog. Ollie and I currently live in a not-so-pet-friendly city for renters. I always lived in apartments that never allowed pets, even with a pet deposit. When Ollie and I met, I told her about wanting to get a dog someday. Ollie told me that she doesn't like a lot of dogs, but would be open to the right dog. This was in the very beginning of us meeting. I basically made it really clear that I will own a dog one day. Throughout our relationship, I would occasionally bring up wanting a dog. Ollie would remind me that our apartment doesn't allow for pets, which was true. Ollie and I agreed that once we moved into a place that allowed for pets, we would look into getting a dog. About 2 months ago, Ollie and I moved into a house just outside of the city we work in. The house is a good size for the 2 of us, plus extra. The landlord is pet-friendly, and the house has a huge, fenced-in yard. It's a much more residential area, and there's a dog park about 3 blocks from the house. On top of the house being perfect for a dog, I'm in a financial place where I can afford a dog. I make very good money and I don't have to travel for work. I'm mentally prepared for potential pet fees and other expenses for having people watch the dog. Since we're finally settled in the house, I decided to mention to Ollie again about going to the shelter and looking at the adoptable dogs. Only this time, Ollie didn't have an excuse for why we couldn't get one. After a few weak excuses, sometimes we go away, Ollie broke down and told me that she doesn't want a dog. In fact, she's never wanted a dog. She was hoping I would forget about my dreams of wanting a dog. I'm not sure what to do. I'm trying to reason with Ollie, but she said her answer will always be no to a dog. She just doesn't like them and doesn't want them. She basically gave me an ultimatum, either her or my potential dog. I'm feeling shitty about this, because I always made it clear to her that I was going to want a dog someday. I feel like she was banking on something unrealistic, and now she's putting me in a lousy spot. My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years. He's a good heart and is normally rational, but his one issue is that he expects to accompany me in every occasion no matter how big or small. He even went with me to my ex-boyfriend's funeral after days of begging. Now my best friend got married few days ago. It was very small and only close family and friends were invited. My boyfriend couldn't come because of the +1 rule. He pitched a hissy fit saying my best friend has no respect for my relationship and was shocked when he learned that I was still going to attend. He told me that if he can't go then I'm expected to not go as well, but that is my best friend and I had to respect her rules. He gave me an ultimatum, either we go together or I stay home with him. I ended up going cause again I respected my friend's rules. He was angry with me and kept calling the entire 2-hour drive, then stopped. Later I got a text from his friend telling me my boyfriend, got into an accident and was taken to the hospital. I freaked out. He gave me the address and I had to leave the wedding and told my friends why. I was crying the entire drive home and kept calling his friend but got no response. I arrived to the hospital and asked about my boyfriend and they checked and told me he wasn't there. My anxiety reached 160% as I kept calling his friends one by one. I just went home and there he was, along with his friend. He saw me and said that he was sorry, but this was the only he can get me home after I left him alone. After the initial shock, I just blew up yelling at him about lying and making me leave my friend's wedding, and having me literally go to the hospital and freaking out cause of him. I kicked his friend out and we got into an argument. He kept talking about how much I love him, thus I left, which is my own doing, not his, and he was just trying to see if I really chose my friend's wedding over him. He then argued that my friend caused this and I shouldn't agree with her to exclude him. I said what he did was horrible and called him horrible and then went to my room. It was awful cause my friends kept calling to check in on him cause they thought he was really at the hospital. He said I overreacted and that I yelled at the wrong person. He has a history of mental health issues but got better the past few months. He also had a recent death in his family which really affected his health generally. 6 years ago my son Matthew had a daughter with his now ex-wife Josie. I have always thought of Josie as my own daughter, so when they divorced 7 years ago due to my son cheating, I was conflicted and disappointed. Josie wasn't particularly close with any of her family, so my husband and I naturally took them in. Josie was an angel. She had insisted that we didn't have to lift a finger more than before we had taken them in, and though she was hurt, she kept civil around Matthew. My husband and I held a huge hand in raising their daughter Ruth, because Matthew remarried less than a year later and now has a 4-year-old son after disowning Ruth. 2 years ago my husband was diagnosed with lung cancer. It was hard on everyone, especially Ruth. They were extremely close. She told him about her girlfriends and boyfriends before anyone else and has always wanted him to be the one to walk her down the aisle at her wedding. Matt rarely ever visited and didn't answer our calls, often saying that we had other kids, so it wasn't like my husband was dying lonely. Last night Matt stopped by to talk about inheritance. He never mentioned Josie nor Ruth and hinted that he thought he should get more inheritance than his siblings the entire time. My husband and I shared awkward looks until he decided to cut in. He explained that everyone would get a piece, but he'd focus more on Ruth and Bonnie, one of our other grandkids. Matt got angry and said that Ruth was just a bastard and that his son deserved more than her. My husband got furious after that and left the room saying that he wouldn't include Matthew at all. Matt yelled back and turned to me saying that Ruth wasn't worth it because she'd just grow up to be a whore like her mother. I told him that I'd rather have her mother as my daughter than him as my son and insisted that he leave. I'm getting phone calls from Matt's wife and family friends saying that my husband and I overreacted, and he was just angry that we were playing favorites. To clear some things up, Josie did not cheat on Matthew. Josie and Matthew met later in college and Josie was known as a party girl. Before that, Ruth isn't the product of an affair, but we are planning on getting a DNA test because what Matthew said has gotten under Ruth's skin. She was at the house when this occurred and overheard it. When it came to taking in Josie and Ruth, we didn't hesitate because Josie is not from here. She and Matt lived in another country until he moved them here a few months before he got caught cheating, and they had nowhere else to go as Josie was a stay-at-home mom. I had no intentions of choosing Josie over Matt then and now, and I never discouraged Matt from visiting. I tried to make it very clear that we weren't picking and choosing when we took Josie in. We just wanted her and our granddaughter to be safe and have a good home. My husband, 35 years old, does not have a car. He sold his old one to help pay for his brother's wedding. I did not agree on this, but he had this car before we got together, so it's a shared property. Besides that, I have my own car, so that did not affect me till my husband started complaining about having to commute to work and hangout places. He tried to get me to let him drive my car several times, but I stood firm and put a boundary, making him understand that my car will never be driven by him. One of the reasons why is because of how bad his driving is. His brother lives out of town. My husband asked if he could drive my car to the wedding, but I refused, but not because I'm not invited. Another story for another day, because like I said, my car is off limits. He threw a fit calling me unreasonable to let him take public transportation because he can barely stand it for 10 minutes, let alone hours. I said it wasn't my problem, which irritated him but made him stop arguing about it. The day that he was supposed to travel out of town, I woke at 10 a.m. and couldn't find my car key. I went outside and couldn't find my car either. I was beyond pissed. I called him and like I expected, he took it and was on his way to the other town. I lost it and told him I gave him no permission to take it for a whole 5 days and said that if he won't turn around with it and come home, then I'd call the cops and report it missing. His response was, "You wouldn't dare do it cause you know what would happen." I hung up on him, then immediately called the police and told them about my situation. I did not tell them my husband took it because they'd think it's a family dispute and decide to not get involved. I just reported it missing. 2 hours later, I got a call from my husband saying he was back in town and was being held at our local police station. I went to the station and talked to the cops. My husband made a scene there, swearing over and over that I gave him permission to take it and said I was acting out of jealousy and spite because he was going to attend a wedding that I was not invited to. I took my car and went home, but he had to stay a little longer. He came home in the evening and went on a rage fit about how I created an awful situation and almost caused him to miss his brother's wedding. He called me vindictive, bitter, and a lunatic to call the police on him and try to accuse him of stealing my car. He had to leave the same day to be able to be there with his family and decided to extend his stay, and he still hasn't gotten back yet. Right now his mom and brother are blasting me for what happened and calling me spiteful.